Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Grant, and I represent the City and County of Broomfield, and I'm the chair of the DRCOG Transportation Advisory Committee. Call to order the June 23rd, 2025 DRCOG TAC meeting at 1:32 p.m. This is an in-person and live stream meeting format, and members of the public attending by Zoom have the ability to mute and unmute themselves and share their webcam. For those attending online, please make sure you have typed your name and it reflects your first and last name and your representation. We ask that for those intending to speak to use the raise hand button to ask a question or comment on an agenda item. If you have any technical questions, you can direct them to staff in the chat box. As a reminder to members and alternates here in person, please press the unmute button on the bottom of your mic stand and make sure the light on your microphone is on and you are prepared to speak. Speak directly into the microphone so your voice will amplify. Please announce your name and representation when asking a question or making a comment for the record. During the business agenda, TAC members and alternates can speak or ask questions, and members of the public may speak during public comment. DRCOG is sending around a sign-in sheet. Please do sign in. And at this time, we'll do introductions of TAC members and alternates here in person. We'll start with Brody.
Thank you. Brody Ayers, Aviation Special Interest Seat.
Del Riccio, Adams County.
Jessica Mickelbus, Department of Transportation.
Mike Whitaker, Lakewood and Jeffco.
Christina Lane, Jefferson County.
Grant Soderlin, Arapahoe County, City of Littleton.
Jeff Dinkenbring, Arapahoe County, City of Centennial.
Michelle Malinakis, City of Lafayette, Boulder County.
Kent Mormon, City of Thornton, Adams County.
Jean Sampson, City of Boulder.
Hillary Simmons, Older Adult Special Interest.
Jeff Boyd, Housing Special Interest.
Brian Weimer, Arapahoe County.
Frank Bruno, via Mobility Services.
Jenna Hahn, Adams County, City of Commerce City.
Cam Kennedy, DRCOG staff.
Sarah Grant, City and County of Broomfield.
Jacob Rieger, DRCOG staff.
And David Kretzinger, City and County of Denver.
Krista Gahan, CDOT.
Colleen Kirby Roberts, Environmental Special Interest Seat.
Sarah Moore, Regional Air Quality Council.
Jonathan Webster, City and County of Denver.
Larry Nummo, City of Castle Pines, Douglas County.
Tom Rice, Town of Castle Rock, Douglas County.
Alex Hutteright, Boulder County.
Carolyn Clam, DRCOG staff.
Justin Schmidt, City of Lone Tree, Douglas County.
Justin Begley, City County, Denver.
Thank you. At this time, I'll turn it over to Jacob for some announcements.
All right, thank you, Chair Grant. Welcome, everyone. We have a couple goodbyes and hellos. Starting with the goodbyes, let's get the sad part out of the way. Today is Ron Papsdorf's last day at DRCOG. As you all recall, we did his tribute at the last TAC meeting, so we won't repeat that today. But I do want to take the opportunity on his last day to once again acknowledge everything that he's done for DRCOG and wish him the best at his new role in Houston. He'll be the Chief MPO Officer for the Houston-Galveston Area Council, and he will start that position actually in a week, so he gets 1 week to move to Houston. So best of luck, Ron. And then Amy Saxton, for many of you know from Clear Creek County, the Community Development Manager, I believe is her title, has now retired. She was actually here for a few months filling our non-MPO seat, which is represented by Clear Creek and Gilpin counties. So we wish her well. We're going to miss her very much too. And then one hello today. I don't think Miguel Aguilar from Erie is here, but I do want to welcome Miguel as the new member for the Southwest Weld area of our region. Thank you, Chair Grant.
Thank you, Jacob. Now we'll move on to, we'll open up the meeting for public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes, and if you've joined by Zoom, please raise your raise hand button, and we'll call on you to begin speaking. If you've joined by phone, please raise your virtual hand by pressing *9, and we'll call on you with the last 3 digits of your phone number. Staff will unmute you, and then you'll need to unmute yourself by pressing *6 on your phone. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, after which we'll ask you to wrap up, and your line will be muted. And as a reminder, after public comment, only TAC members and alternates will be able to partake in the discussion regarding each agenda item. Do you have any public comment here in person? Do we have any online?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Give it a moment, but I do not see any hands raised at this time. Thank you.
Pam, we'll close the public comment period. Moving on to the meeting summary for the May 19th, 2025 TAC meeting summary, which is attachment A. Is there any discussion, corrections, or questions about the May 19th, 2025 TAC meeting? None? And then the meeting summary will stand. Thank you. We'll move on to our first action item, our first and only action item today, the 2025 Regional Transportation Plan Update, the Regional Roadway System. This is attachment B in your packet, and this will be presented by Alvin Badal Sanchez, Regional Transportation Planning Program Manager for DRCOG.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So the item before you, we've come to a number of times for the TAC to discuss, which is our regional roadway system. I'll give an update on the action we're looking to take, the process it took to get us here. This is one of the first action items that is related to the Regional Transportation Plan update that we are currently undertaking. And so moving forward, we'll be going before the RTC and the board. So a reminder, this is our regional roadway system. It's available on our data tool if you need a refresher of that network. We fix it at the beginning of an update to our regional transportation plan before we get into our calls for projects or solicitation. Ideally, these are the most important roadways, the most heavily traveled roadways in the region that we add to our network, that we have on our network. We classify them a number of different ways, but for the purposes of the Regional Transportation Plan and the Transportation Improvement Program, the question really is, are you on this network, not what classification you might be. This is the network that it sets for eligible capacity projects in our Regional Transportation Plan and our Transportation Improvement Program. It's the network we use to model in our travel model, and so it's also part of our air quality conformity and our state GHG transportation planning standard work. And so it's important to set this before we move into a call for projects and have to do our own modeling to show compliance for both of those analyses that we're required to do. We've taken a number of different actions this update cycle. The first has just been reviewing the federal aid eligibility of all the roadways that are currently on the network. We want to make sure every roadway that we show as eligible for our funding is eligible through the federal functional classification system. Staff had proposed an expansion in our rural and mountain areas of the planning area. We've been vetting that proposed expansion by further exploration, working with our local member governments. We've also looking at expanding to make sure all Colorado state highways are included on the network. That has been one thing we have noted in the past, and we want to make sure that we do capture all state highways in our region. We've been presenting at sub-regional transportation forums on the RRS itself, just having a question and answer session. I'm helping answer questions related to the call that we did have. Missed that bullet point, a call for revisions, March 17th to April 14th. So we got a number of submissions from our local government partners that we've also been reviewing, seeing how they align with the staff initiated revisions and how they could make sense in the network. And then as needed, we've been meeting one-on-one with local agencies to work through the submittals, answer any questions that they might have, help with the submittals or help evaluate those submittals. So appreciate the time everyone has taken throughout this process, coordinating on this network. Like I mentioned, we had our call for revisions. We received a number of submissions. This number might not be exactly maybe the number of forms we received from an agency. They might have compiled or combined a number of requests. We might also have taken the liberty if it was a roadway that had multiple segments with different laneage, we might have shown that as different requests versus one. So if you're seeing this number and it doesn't seem completely familiar to you, that might be part of the reasoning behind that. For each of these, we did compare it to our current network, how close it might be, what travel might be on it, worked with local governments as necessary to evaluate whether there were more appropriate termini, more appropriate segments. If this segment came on, should a different segment potentially come off? And so with that, I'll show at first the visual of those proposed revisions. In teal were local submitted additions. Red dotted lines are local submitted removals. Yellow, gold, local submitted realignments, and then pink is the DRCOG suggested additions. So these are missing Colorado state highways, and then rural major collectors that are in primarily our mountain and rural areas that are outside our urbanized area. And so wanted to reflect that sometimes those roadways in our rural and mountain areas are more critical to travel in those regions compared to maybe a similarly classed roadway in our urban settings. With that, here is our recommended network and our recommended actions for our regional roadway system. The dark blue and the dark magenta pink are those that we are looking to move forward, that we are recommending moving forward, while those that are light teal, light pink are those that we are recommending not moving forward with. We do still have a number pending, as you can see on the map, and that are in that spreadsheet list of projects that we are still working with local governments on to confirm which of those segments make sense to include. And so that is still a pending action that DRCOG staff are taking for 3 or 4 segments in the region. This list also corresponds to the Excel spreadsheet PDF that's also part of your document materials. And so if there are questions, we can review those as needed. So I can move between both of those maps, but do just want to set the discussion. We are seeking a recommendation, move to recommend to the Regional Transportation Committee, adopt the regional roadway system dependent on federal functional classification and planning boundary. As you look at this map, you might notice some roadways that are on our boundary. We want to make sure that those are actually in our planning area and that we need to model those. And then we'll also be confirming federal functional classification for these new additions. So just as we did with the current network, we want to make sure that any roadway that we're adding is federally functionally classified appropriately, and if not, we can take necessary and appropriate actions if needed. That concludes my presentation, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alvin. Are there any questions or comments for DRCOG? Michelle.
Hey, Alvin, thank you. And thanks again to your team for being really open for discussion throughout this process. I know you all went out of your way to have office hours and meet the forums. I was curious, specifically for Lowell, which I know is very Adams County specific. You had mentioned through email about it being really close to Federal Boulevard, and that was one of the reasons for it not being included in the regional roadway system. Is there a specific benchmark that DRCOG tries to reach for how spacing should be for the inclusion?
There is not a specific threshold or criteria that we look at in terms of distance from the existing regional roadway system. Part of it is just an art. How close might it already be to a pretty significant regional facility? We thought with this one, with federal right there, it didn't entirely make sense for a potential next round could be resubmitted. A future discussion might also be like what logical termini could exist for that, just dependent on like what travel you're seeing on there. Since it is so close to federal, I think that'll be a pretty primary driver for future conversations. But as the network evolves and future RTP updates, it's always available to be resubmitted.
Okay, great. I appreciate that, especially being open for conversation in the future. I think both Adams County and Westminster feel it's a really good road to get bikes even further off of Federal and Pecos, and definitely hope to see it on the network in the future. And then I guess just a general kind of point on feedback too, if you're open for that.
Of course.
I think since that one specifically, there was some coordination across jurisdictions to submit and then kind of receive and digest the feedback. And just the timing between that and this meeting, if there's any way in the future that there could be a little elongated space in the timeline for jurisdictions to do that coordination before tax, that would be very helpful, I know.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Larry?
One quick question. On some of them, it says pending. One of them says move forward with, and some of them say pending. What does pending mean?
So for all of those that we received submissions on, or that we had questions related to DRCOG staff initiated revisions, we reached out to local governments to gauge their preference or priority for particular segments. So there were some that DRCOG staff didn't want to take a recommendation on without having a little more local knowledge. And so for some of those, we're still pending or waiting to hear back on what a priority segment for that might be. For a couple of them, DRCOG staff are amenable to including a corridor in that area. We would just like to hear from the local government what that priority corridor would be.
Okay, thank you.
I'll also note there are a few that are listed as no action needed. There were a couple of data discrepancies in the shapefile of data sets that we provided to our local government partners and in some of our data tool viewing. So for those, DRCOG staff did check those, and they are either already on our network or were a data issue and are not on our network, do not need to be removed from our network. So for those, no action is needed because it's already appropriately categorized or not.
Brian Weimer.
Thanks, Alvin. Can you go back to the map? Kind of down by I-25, kind of northeast of that, is that 470 in that area right there?
Here?
Yeah.
No, it parallels E470. It's guardrail.
Okay. That was my question, if it was 470 or if it was guardrail.
No, it does follow 470. DRCOG staff's recommendation here is to include the existing part of guardrail to make that connection to the interchange that is already at E470, and then for a future conversation, look at a potential addition of the future guardrail extension to Parker.
Any additional questions or comments for DRCOG staff? Brian Weimer.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. That motion is to move to recommend to the Regional Transportation Committee adoption of the regional roadway system as presented today, depending on federal functional classifications and planning boundaries.
Brian, you have a second?
I'll second.
Justin, sorry, who that came from? Oh, sorry, Larry Nemo. Thank you for the second. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor, you say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. And that concludes our action items for today. Our first discussion item, which is item number 5 in your packet, will be the small area forecast member agency feedback update. This is attachment C in your packet, and Zach is out sick today, so this will be presented by James Kohlberg, data analyst for DRCOG.
Hello. Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm James Kohlberg, a data analyst on the data science team with Zach. I'll be filling in for him today to go over the small area forecast and the update that we've been working on over the past year or so. Just a real quick outline of what I'm going to be talking about. What is the small area forecast? What is the land use model, which is we use to create the small area forecast? How did we incorporate member agency feedback? And then where can the new forecast be accessed? Most recently, to kind of finalize this forecast, we asked for member agency feedback back in January. We hosted a webinar to kind of kick it all off. We created a web app to collect those comments and held office hours for one-on-one meetings. And any jurisdictions that did comment received direct emails back that sort of described how their comments were incorporated. And then finally, to sort of end everything, we had a webinar on May 29th to share that finalized forecast. So the small area forecast is a forecast of population, households, and jobs. Our base year this time around is 2020, and our forecast year is 2050. It's created at the census block level, and then how you all maybe would interact with it would be at the TAS level or block group or municipality. But the forecast itself is actually generated at the block level. It's a very important input for DRCOG's travel demand model, and more recently, it's a pretty important input for DRCOG's regional housing needs assessment. So it starts with a county level forecast that we get from the Department of Local Affairs from the state. And that is a county level forecast. So our forecast perfectly aligns with that forecast for the entire state. We don't deviate from that at all. And then we use the urban sim land use model to apportion that growth down to the TAS or the block level. So urban sim, again, is the model that we use to create the small area forecast. It's a microsimulation model, and it sort of represents how individuals would behave in the region around household choices, business choices, as they interact with real estate markets. So it simulates annual changes, and it captures households moving around, renting versus owning, different choices that households or employers can make about where they locate, where they develop, redevelop, things like that. So this is a really high level of sort of the steps that the urban sim land use model takes in any given simulation year. And I won't get into too much detail about these steps, but the green steps are new steps that we've added this year to sort of better capture the demographics of the region. And generally, there's the two places where we take feedback from the member agencies, which is what I'm going to mostly be talking about today. And the step called scheduled developments, that's where we are directly inserting known development projects from around the region. We get that data from CoStar and Zonda. And then in this build new housing units, the model is sort of, statistically figuring out where to build new houses in the region and modeling that. And that is kind of constrained by zoning. So we were asking for feedback on those capacities, how much should we be limiting sort of what the future potential, the build potential of an area is based on zoning or land use plans. So like I was saying, every census block kind of has an assigned development capacity for households and jobs, and that's coming mostly from zoning. There's over 1,900 unique zones in the DRCOG region. And then we also make sure that no undevelopable areas such as water bodies and open space get built on. And like I already mentioned, we get some good data about future growth from our subscriptions. And then also the local jurisdiction feedback is a really important place to get those development projects. So those development projects that we get from CoStar and Zonda only include sort of projects that are already under construction or nearing construction, whereas those zoned capacities, those future capacities, those kind of go out to 2050, and those can be sort of much more less defined. So this is a screenshot of that comment map. So each dot represents a comment that we received from one of the member agencies. So this is a list of agencies that submitted comments. There's about 105 comments from 12 jurisdictions. And so we adjusted the future capacities of 2,800 blocks and added 169 scheduled development projects based on your feedback. I already kind of mentioned that how the feedback was used, increasing capacity within the model. And so when we turn up the capacity, that's essentially like raising the ceiling. It doesn't guarantee that a certain project will get built in our model. The growth is still being competed, by all those different projects. And so it still has to match up with that county control total that we get from DOLA. And a lot of these changes that we got from the member agencies applied to PUD type zonings. And the data that we get from CoStar and Zonda is pretty complete. So there were, some instances where we were missing stuff that the jurisdictions let us know. And a lot of that was around hotel to apartment conversions and then rehabs and demolitions. And again, those projects are directly inserted into the land use model. And so there is no competition within the model for those projects. And like I said, those are like well-known projects that are already under construction or are on their way. So I think this is included in your packet if you want to take a look at the web map by block group. You can also download a shapefile by TAS from our data catalog. And then there's some more information about the small area forecast on our website. And just a quick aside about how this small area forecast is different from previous small area forecasts. If you've used that TAS shapefile before, this time around we are using employment data from the state for the first time, and there is confidentiality issues with that data, so we did have to suppress some of the data. So 57 out of the 2,300 block groups would be suppressed, or about 200 of the 2,200 TASs are suppressed. And so any consultants that use the DRCOG travel model would obviously receive the full complete data set, but if you're downloading that TAS data set, just be aware that there is a little bit of missing employment data from that data set. So the next steps, the timeline for the small area forecast, it's already actually been incorporated into the regional housing needs assessment. And then we used the forecast for the RTP scenarios that we have already been working on. And then the air quality conformity, this will be the forecast that's used for that in the future. Questions?
Thank you, James. Something to add?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Grant. James, thanks very much. I just wanted to put this in just a little bit of context before we get to discussion. This is really important, as James noted, for a variety of reasons, particularly for us in the MPO process. It's actually a federal requirement when we prepare or update our regional transportation plan, in our case, our 2015 regional transportation plan update that we've been embarking on, that we actually show our planning assumptions. That's really what this turns into, is the planning assumptions that feed into our long-range plan process. We have been talking in this committee for several months about scenarios, and even before scenarios, some of the trends that we were seeing with these updated land use forecasts, in terms of how we're aging a little differently, our population's a little bit lower, some of those trends. So this stuff is really important for our long-range planning process. So as James noted, it goes into our model ultimately from a technical side, but I just wanted to put a finer point on kind of the strategic importance of this, both for the MPO side as well as James noted for our regional housing and transportation strategy work as well. The other point I want to make about it is that one of the things that we very commonly hear every time we update our land use forecast is we'll hear from jurisdictions, well, our area looks a little bit different, or we just approved this big development, or we're going to approve this big development. And I think James addressed some of that through the course of the presentation about how we handle that. But I do want to make the point that when you all and when we all are doing corridor studies, NEPA studies, PEL studies, other types of kind of small area type studies, and you look at the land use, you can make, within reason, different assumptions than what may be in our regional forecasts. As James said, our regional forecasts are held to the state's forecast for this region, the control totals. But at the corridor level or a small area level, those can and are sometimes very different. But these are the regional forecasts that we use in our long-range planning process. So just wanted to put those points out there. Thank you, Chair Grant.
Okay, good. Are there any questions or comments for DRCOG staff? Kent Mormon.
Yes, Kent Mormon, City of Thornton. First of all, thank you, James, for the presentation. I had a question on the suppressed data. So if someone goes to the website, the information's suppressed, but if a consultant goes, you provide them the complete data set. How does that fit into, one, the regional housing that was just completed or is underway now, and two, how does that now affect people making choice to locate here, saying if they're counting the housetops and employment to decide to put in a restaurant, they're not going to necessarily come to you to get that complete set. They're just now look on your website. So how is that answered? Is it very clear which TASs or which areas are suppressed and to contact DRCOG staff on your website? Just asking the question.
Yeah.
I think I understand why you would suppress the information if it's only one or two employers in the reality, but just asking how that'll be handled.
Yeah, no, and you're exactly right. It's the QCEW data from the state, and so this is how they handle requests as well. Is that and just like you said, it's when there's like a single employer. So something like where there's nothing else around there, so you could just look at this data and know exactly how many employees are at that one company. Obviously, they don't want that. So as far as the housing needs assessment, I don't think employment would have been included in any of that process, so it shouldn't have affected that at all. That was mostly just looking at the housing side, and none of that has been suppressed. Also, if you do go to download the data, it's very obvious which TASs are suppressed because it'll be empty instead of a 0. So if it has a 0, you know that it's 0 employees versus if the column is just empty, and you know that it's suppressed. Did that answer all your questions?
I think so. Okay. I'm just concerned of a retail establishments come in that sales tax or a job that may be a primary job that brings money into the region. And maybe there's enough restaurants around to service those guys, whatever. Not showing that there's not doing. I'm concerned that that's economic.
Got it. Yeah, so my suggestion would just be to look at a bigger geography maybe. So I don't think there were any municipalities that had to be suppressed. So if somebody just know how many jobs were in a particular municipality, that will be shared and
Any other questions or comments for DRCOG? Seeing none, thank you, James, for that update. And I really appreciate DRCOG's effort to work with local agencies, in particular those that have a lot of PUDs. So I know a lot of effort went into updating all of these block groups and transportation analysis zones. Thank you. We will move on to item number 6 in your packet, 2050 Regional Transportation Plan Update. This is attachment D in your packet. And this will be presented by Alvin Vidal-Sanchez, Regional Transportation Planning Program Manager for DRCOG.
Good afternoon again. We're getting into the season of RTP updates and actions, so I envision we'll be having a lot of conversations in this venue moving forward. We wanted to give you an update on a number of different activities related to the Regional Transportation Plan. I know last month y'all heard from us on our scenario analysis work. We wanted to continue that conversation and look forward to next steps. So we'll be providing an update or overview of how we handled investment priorities last time when we were updating the Regional Transportation Plan. We built a number of framework structures that we'd like to revisit for this call for projects solicitation process as we move from our scenarios work into that future process, and then just a quick update on a number of advisory groups that we've stood up here at the agency that we had convened last cycle that we saw great benefit from, that we also wanted to bring back this year. So since that scenario presentation last month, we have still been looking at some additional model runs to vet some of the results that we got, what different magnitudes of change occur if you take different components out of that. But from the scenario results that we do have, just wanted to summarize where we are right now, what we found through our scenario results work. The first one being that land use alone is not the primary driver of mobility changes. 4 or 5 years ago when we did our scenario work, we saw that land use was a driver that was as significant or not more significant than our transportation investments. With the way the scenarios have been defined this most recent round, that is not the case. And so to see some of those significant mobility changes, we are needing complementary transportation strategies paired with those and not just land use strategies alone. In addition to some of the regional changes that we were seeing, there are also the potential for significant changes at the community and the neighborhood level. So if you think back to microtransit, 150, 200 rides will not show up in our regional travel model, but that makes a very big difference for a community who is using those rides to get to daily needs and to be able to thrive in their neighborhoods and their communities. You could also see some changes related to our complete street scenario around reconnecting some regional grids, reconnecting communities across highways. As you make those connections, there's the potential for significant shifts in mode, how folk are choosing to travel for trips. Just as last time, there are some select scenarios that do meet our MetroVision targets. We highlighted vehicle miles traveled, non-single occupancy vehicle trips, and delay. But as you combine those different ones, you see that larger magnitude of change. Like I mentioned, we're still doing some additional model runs and exploration for scenarios, but these are the takeaways that we have so far from our most recent analysis. Bring it up because scenarios are one piece of our larger framework that we use to build our regional transportation plan. They're not the only piece. Our plans are not the only piece. We also take into account all of the planning work that our local governments are doing, CDOT, RTD, requirements to come down from our federal partners, US DOT. So as you look through this list, hopefully you're seeing plans that are important to your agencies that inform the priorities and the investments that you're making in your own agencies. And so the RTP rolls all of these up in a number of different ways to show those priorities in the region over the next 20 to 30 years. There are a number of different ways that we show investment in our plan. It's not just projects. We also have what we call project categories and investment allocations. So these are determined through our interagency process between CDOT staff, RTD staff, DRCOG staff. If we have $100 million in X type of fund, what percentage is going to specific projects? What percentage is already called for in terms of maintenance, operations, preservation, enhancement? So that's done through our interagency process with 3 regional partners. Some of the categories that we use to show that funding are safety, active transportation, bridge preservation, rehabilitation. And so those are types of projects that we don't need to show a line on a map, a dot on a map, a row in a spreadsheet. We know that investment's occurring, but we don't need to get to that granular level. The other way that we show investments that's pretty important for our future call for project solicitation process is the actual specific projects. We do have a threshold for those that need to be in our plan. Those are roadway widenings of 1 center lane mile or more on our regional roadway system. We just took that action to start setting that network. New interchanges, interchange improvements that add or delete movements, and then any new rapid transit lines, so light rail, commuter rail, bus rapid transit. Those we include in our plan regardless of whether they are locally funded or regionally funded. And then if you're not on our regional roadway system, those are the roads that we don't need to reflect on our network. We don't need to reflect those projects in our plan. So each of these different ways, we work through a different process through our MPO planning process to help set those priorities. And then there's obviously also just the narrative content. What are we saying our priorities are for the region? How are we establishing our policy stances as a region in the regional transportation plan? Before specific projects, we include a number of different projects in the regional transportation plan specifically. So those first 2 are the ones that we have to include. And then last cycle update, we did broaden the categories that we asked for during our call for projects in our solicitation phase. So our safety and complete streets projects, our active transportation projects, freight, and then corridor planning. Corridor planning is broken down into both roadway and then transit projects, and freight was something that we actually heard a lot of from the TAC at the time about it being a priority for the region, so that became a category that we also started to create a section for in our regional transportation plan. For all of these, we have taken a first look at projects that are in the regional transportation plan. We don't just throw out every project at the beginning of an update and start fresh. It did take us a number of years to get to our current regional transportation plan and update and amendment cycle. So we do want to start with the projects that are currently in our regional transportation plan and evaluate where they might be right now in the project development phase. So there are a number of projects that just based on where we are timeline-wise don't need to be in our regional transportation plan. If they're going to be complete this year, we don't need to worry about them being shown in our plan. So those were taken care of from a modeling, air quality, RTP, investment perspective. There are projects that we are proposing, just as last time, to automatically include in our regional transportation plan. If a project's already under construction, we'll show it. It just won't pull from our federal funding that we're showing in the plan. And if a project's in NEPA, we don't want to stop that project development process or cause any alarm in that project development process. So carrying forward that one automatically into the next update. And then same with a project if it's in NEPA or construction in the TIP or the STIP. And then there are projects from last time that we are proposing can be resubmitted for evaluation. So if you've done a PEL, a vision study, a corridor study, being able to resubmit those for continued inclusion in the regional transportation plan. There are other projects that are potentially further out that work might not have been done on. So reaffirming that those are still priorities for different forums. And resubmitting those, and then if there are any locally funded projects that an agency would like to submit for in our solicitation process to use regional funding, those are also available to be included in our regionally funded side of our regional transportation plan. So to taking these projects and what could be a solicitation process, we would start with those priorities, move into an evaluation process. Those would go to our a regional review panel made up of staff from CDOT, RTD, DRCOG, and a member of each of the different county transportation forums as last time. We would combine that with the revenue assumptions that we have available to us over the next 20 to 30 years for the regional transportation plan, pulled from all of our different partners, CDOT, RTD, program distribution, our public highway authorities, local government funding is also captured, but wouldn't need to go through this particular evaluation process. I would create a draft list of investment priorities. Those would go before the TAC, RTC, and the board for review before they actually get approved, and then those would become the investment priorities that are set for the regional transportation plan. And those are the ones that we would then include in our travel model and in our networks to actually show compliance for air quality conformity and the state GHG transportation planning standard. We developed a dual framework last cycle based on the different roles each of our different partners, agencies play in the MPL planning process. We're looking at continuing that process. One would be the interagency priorities process. So this would be staff from CDOT, DRCOG, and RTD, the partners in our federally required 3C planning process, working together to identify the greatest transportation needs at the regional level. And then sub-regional priorities, the greatest transportation needs within each of the county transportation forum areas. And so that would take the form of a transportation forum solicitation. And this was built off of the dual track process that the region is very familiar with related to the Transportation Improvement Program, but whereas that one includes federal funding targets by region versus sub-region, this would just take into account the different roles each of our agency partners play in our planning process. Last cycle, we also leaned on the Transportation Improvement Program criteria for calculating the average of each of our county forums. So the average of population, employment, and vehicle miles traveled. As that broke down, this was not a funding target in the RTP. This was also not a promise of those number of projects in the RTP, but a submittal cap for projects that could be included in the regional transportation plan. So as the City and County of Denver is 25% of our region, roughly, they were eligible for up to 25 projects to be submitted in our solicitation to be evaluated for inclusion in the RTP. Again, not promising any of these numbers in the regional transportation plan, but setting a cap just to reflect each of our county transportation forums in the region. And then we did set a floor last cycle for our smaller agencies of 5 submittals. So regardless of whether you were 5% or not of the region, we did provide a floor of 5 submittals for our more mountain community, smaller agencies. Last cycle, our evaluation framework took the form of our MetroVision outcomes and performance measures. As we have an adopted regional transportation plan with a number of priorities identified, the proposal would be to use our existing priorities that are outlined in the regional transportation plan: safety, air quality, regional transit, active transportation, freight, and multimodal mobility. These are the priorities we developed criteria around for our most recent cycle amendments. And so the proposal would be to carry forward this framework for evaluation of projects to be continued to be included in the plan or for new projects for evaluation. A quick highlight that we have stood up 2 advisory groups that we had convened last time. One was a civic advisory group. So interested residents ideally represent a diverse range of communities and experiences in our region, are not historically potentially involved in our transportation planning process. And then our youth advisory panel made up of younger voices, primarily high school age representatives who might be on individual youth councils in your own agencies. And so we've reconvened both of those groups for the development of the regional transportation plan. We've held our first kickoff meeting with each of those, and we're looking at having another 3 or 4 during the update process. So trying to align those with different milestones that are occurring in the regional transportation plan. Just as our TAC, RTC, and board might be getting updates, we want to make sure those bodies are also receiving updates and being able to have their input as part of the update to the RTP. So besides my contact information slide, just a couple prompts. As you saw that list of project types in the current regional transportation plan, in your own work, from your own feedback, are you hearing other priorities that maybe aren't currently reflected in the regional transportation plan that might make sense to include or that we should explore? I highlighted the current 6 priorities for the regional transportation plan. Are there other priorities that you're hearing in your own feedback through your own planning process that we could explore, evaluate for inclusion as well? We'll be leaning on feedback that we've heard from our various committees, the board, as well as the advisory groups for are there other ways we should be evaluating projects beyond those 6 priorities. That concludes my presentation, Chair.
Thank you, Alvin. Are there any questions or comments on the discussion questions? Kent Mormon.
Thank you, Alvin. I'm Kent Mormon, City of Thornton. I had a question on those 6, if you could go back to that slide. Where does expanding capacity of some roadways, 6-lane, where does that fall on those evaluation? That's the first question. And the second question is on the 15 submittals, is that just for the regional portion of the projects that we'd want under, or is that sub-region and?
For the first question, these aren't specific project types specifically. There can be safety projects, active transportation projects. So it was more about evaluating how each different project could improve or enhance each of these priorities. I would say multimodal mobility, maybe primarily for those capacity projects that are primarily maybe motor vehicle, recognizing that most, if not all, the projects in our region check a lot of boxes in terms of mode, in terms of providing different ways for folk to travel in our region. So not a particular project type necessarily in this priority evaluation framework, but as we did identify projects in the current RTP, multimodal mobility, I would say, is where many of those capacity projects landed. And the second question related to the submittal cap. So this would be just for the County Transportation Forum decision-making. And so there are other projects that RTD or CDOT could submit that would not take away from the submittals for the County Transportation Forums. Last cycle, there were some priorities at the forum level that some thoughts were used for interstate projects, interchange projects, U.S. highway projects that wanted to show priority for, even though CDOT might have also been submitting projects for that. So it's not a if or, it can be an and.
So just a question on bus rapid transit that would go across in 3 counties. How would that be?
So that was handled a number of different ways last time. I would say we're flexible to what that looks like. For some corridors that did span multiple forums, multiple jurisdictions, we did receive multiple submissions just to reflect how much of a priority it was for those particular forums, those particular communities. But we would also accept if there was a coordination between various forums for maybe a lead submitter for that project, just to not potentially use up one of those submittals slots that could be available in this solicitation phase. Part of the evaluation also looked at if we did receive X submittals on this corridor, did it make sense to group those into a larger corridor project that allows continued planning on it that might not have maybe initially been the intention of the local government submitter, but at the regional level, from a 30,000-foot perspective, let's group all these together and see what progress we could make on the larger corridor level.
Jacob?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Grant. Just want to supplement Alvin's excellent answer to Ken's question. Just to clarify a point, it's easy for us to default to sort of tip language about regional share and sub-regional share and project submittals. And as Alvin noted, yes, we are using the tip framework, the tip criteria in terms of the proportionality, the allocation, as he's showing on the screen, of the number of projects to be submitted by forums. But I do want to be really crystal clear that this is not a regional and sub-regional process. This is a process for the long-range transportation plan that reflects that priorities in this region come from the top down and the bottom up. So you all at local governments and your forums are the bottom up. We want to hear from you. We want to give you a process in which you would submit those candidate projects to us on local roadways, on state roadways, multimodal priorities, you know, whatever is important to you as local governments through your sub-regional forums. But the top-down side of it is, you know, through our federally required 3C planning process that Alvin alluded to, the three agencies, DRCOG, CDOT, RTD, we also have priorities. We will also work together on some of those priorities, as well as melding all of this together in partnership with all of you to develop the fiscally constrained plan and the ultimate sort of list of project and program investment priorities. So this is more about priority identification. This is not about regional versus sub-regional share. Thanks.
Justin Begley?
Thank you. Thank you, Alvin. Thanks, Jacob, for that context. It does lead me to another question on the project types. Are those type assignments going to be done by the forums, or does the forum scope and submit projects and then they're assigned a type by the review panel or DRCOG?
You repeat the question maybe just so I digest it?
And I'm kind of going back to the last plan for this, or the tip, sorry, but essentially looking at the project types here, and we did experience this a little bit over the last several years, where a project came up and this was a Vision Zero safety project, and we're going to scope it and it's safety first, right? Now, a lot of these elements in the project types are contained within our projects, and that's one of the evolutions the city has worked towards, which is we used to be very kind of individual thinking about some of these priorities within projects, but we're really looking at projects as we're delivering many, if not all of these in some contexts. So where are the project types assigned to the projects and by whom? And are there allocations? Is there thought given, you know, either at the forum level or later to the fact that there's going to be some diversity of project type assignments, even though many of these project types could have many of these elements?
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that clarification. Like I noted earlier, there's no one-trick ponies in our regional transportation plan. A lot of our projects do capture and enhance a lot of different components too. Safety, active transportation, multimodal mobility, improving air quality. So we did not dictate like what, there's no definition for an active transportation project beyond this high level one here that's on the slide. When it came time to like actually start to tag or catalog projects, it primarily came from information that we received during the solicitation process from the submittals. So what was maybe the primary impetus for the project, recognizing maybe smaller projects do a lot. So I wouldn't say like being tagged a particular different way, limited funding of particular project types. There was no like breakdown in we need X amount of safety projects funded, X amount of freight projects funded. I think we might have like 5 freight projects in the regional transportation plan right now. But that wasn't based on any particular like definition, funding, caps, threshold calculus from staff side. It was more about what we received during the submittal, how did it potentially make sense to define at a regional level for a 20-year plan. So staff didn't define what that needed to look like specifically.
Okay, thanks. And mostly I'm just asking because we have past practice to understand how this was treated in the last plan and how it impacted set-aside call for projects and definition of other things too. So I think if it's largely going to stay on that same track, we understand it. If there's going to be changes, it would be good to define those for the forums and the plan.
I appreciate that. I see Todd in the room, so I can make sure to have a conversation on how it's been implemented in the TIP and make sure any changes that might occur through this or what would carry forward were clear on the front end.
Matt Mormon?
Just a clarification on the, like you showed for Adams County 15. That funds that were planning to be used, like federal or state funds and local funds, or for instance, we may have a roadway that build locally, our own local funds, or have a developer build. Those aren't included in that 15.
Correct. The submittals are only for projects that you would be requesting regional funds for, so state or federal dollars. We handle the locally funded capacity projects a little differently. We've been working with various local governments to affirm that list currently as it stands. And so a locally funded project could be submitted for regional funds if desired, but doesn't provide any heads up, I'm losing my word right there, preference through the regional fund call, but the submittal numbers you're seeing here would just be a cap for projects that you would like to be considered for inclusion in the RTP using state or federal dollars.
Jessica Mickelbest.
Yeah, thanks, Alvin. Good work on this. Just two questions. One, I'm not sure where this fits. Maybe your team can take it back and think about it. But on the evaluation framework, I feel like we're missing projects that fix something that's broken or like state of good repair or fix it first. And I'm not sure if it fits or how it fits, but I feel like if you're, for example, an interchange that's really poor condition, it might meet some of these other things, but would it get a little boost because it's taking something that needs to be fixed that's not in a state of good repair and making it better? I don't see that in here, and I don't know if it fits or where it would go, but just maybe something to think about. And then, I appreciate that. We've been hearing maintenance a lot in various venues, local government partners at the state level. So appreciate that as evaluation criteria framework moving forward. Yeah, thanks. I feel like it's missing. And then second, I've been staring at these two, and I think that I know the difference, but they feel really, really similar. So multimodal mobility and active transportation feel very similar. And so I'm wondering the key difference between those, and it looks like it's the vulnerable and underserved transportation users, and I'm wondering if, like on safety, you just put safety for all users, and if it's multimodal mobility for all users, or what's the differentiator if you're trying to look at two different types of projects and which would go to Justin's point, like in which bucket? Yeah, the way it ended up shaking out, sorry, I should have gone to that. I had it right here, apologies. Active transportation ended up shaking out to like maybe more regional trails, as in terms of the project types that got submitted, or larger like sidewalk scope facilities. So I think when it came to that, we were really focusing on how to like bike and walk in the region. Safety, we wanted to from conversation at the time, just to ensure we were talking about all users. One shift we could look at in this particular cycle could be, should we be focusing on vulnerable road users in that definition, this update? So I would say the way it shook out last cycle is active transportation became more regional trail focused and more longer corridor scope sidewalk projects, and safety ended up really being a larger catch-all, not just for vulnerable road users, but crashes in general in the region, which could also capture like arterial projects and complete streets projects. But as you get through all of these, you start to like
see how a complete streets project could be multimodal mobility, could be active transportation, could be safety. So from like an earlier point, we didn't try to make the evaluation framework project type based, more just what we were hearing as priorities from the engagement at the time. But I appreciate the overlap that's on both of them, and reflecting on that, I think we can be clear in the distinction between a number of these categories.
Okay, and just to clarify, so it was the multimodal and active transportation, those two are the two that feel really similar. I just confused you and threw in safety, because that one says for all. So I'm wondering if you adjust the multimodal mobility and active transportation and just put for all, but to your point, having the vulnerable road users is also really important. So they just, multimodal and active transportation felt, trying to just tell the difference if I had a couple projects where each would go.
Yep, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Jacob?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Grant. Jessica, I want to come back to your first point because it's important. Alvin, if you could go back to the project type slide, please, thank you. So what we're talking about today for these candidate project submittals are these major projects, multimodal projects, safety projects, right? These major projects that you all might submit as sort of candidate project submittals that we would evaluate through this process to help build a fiscally constrained plan, right? So these categories of projects. Remember, and I hate to keep citing federal law, but under federal law, as a non-attainment area for air quality conformity, we're actually required to list certain types of projects. Those are the first two up there, those roadway capacity and rapid transit capacity projects. We're required under federal law to individually list and map, identify those projects within the plan. What Alvin referred to earlier is that starting this last plan cycle, we wanted to do more than that and reflect this region's priorities. Safety is a perfect example. We've always had safety in the plan, but it was hard to point to safety projects in the plan. Now, if you go look at our 2050 regional transportation plan, you can actually see safety projects because we as a region felt that was important enough, impactful enough that we list safety projects in the plan, right? But bottom line is that this today is all about projects. Jessica, to your point about maintenance, operations, I think we even have financial allocations for things like snow removal in the plan, like, right? Some of those things that are also really critically important may not show up as projects in the plan. They could. There could be a maintenance type project that's so big in scope, so big in cost that we would want to identify that as an individual project. But Jessica's point serves as a reminder that in addition to these major projects that we show in the plan, a big bulk of the regional transportation plan is actually project funding categories. We don't show sidewalks in the plan. We don't show every intersection maintenance operations project in the plan. We don't show local bus service in the plan per se. You know, there's a whole list of categories that we don't show in the plan as projects, but we do show them as financial allocations because of how important they are. Thanks.
Thank you, Jacob. Additional questions or comments for DRCOG? Go ahead, Brian Weimer.
Thank you, Chair Grant. And Jacob, thank you for setting the hierarchy where local governments stand. I think you said at the bottom of the tree or something like that. But anyway, my question then is, underneath the scenario planning meeting revision, you don't have to go back there. You talk about delay as one of them. One, how are you calculating that, and what are you looking at? And is vehicle hours traveled being considered as part of this? Because one could argue that is a good metric for air quality conformity. So kind of curious how those all tie together.
So for vehicle hours of delay, we lean on our target established in MetroVision for 2040. What that threshold we want to be under is. And then for the second one, do we include delay in our evaluation? One piece we did include last cycle during the update was trying to bring a number of different data points in our conversations during the regional review panel phase. And we did do a congestion mobility score check on projects that were submitted. What would the network potentially look like without those planned investments? So that was a consideration during the evaluation phase, in addition to the score, the county priority, the regional panel's priority, also looking at congestion potential in that corridor in the future with and without the investment.
To follow up on that question, so then would that fall under the air quality evaluation framework, looking at the reduction of VMT and reducing congestion?
Gotcha. I apologize. I didn't completely comprehend that question. If it's not clear in the existing evaluation framework, it would either be included as an additional data point, or we could add that as a new evaluation metric. So maybe not the 6 priorities, but additional considerations or additional MetroVision targets that aren't already talking potentially about one of these priorities. So we would add it.
Any additional questions or feedback for DRCOG? Justin Schmitz.
Yeah, Justin Schmitz, City of Lone Tree. Yeah, I had just a quick question. I think it's pretty exciting that you guys are getting feedback from some of these advisory groups, right? We do that at the city, and good way to get a lot of feedback. One thing, I guess I was just curious, is that something you guys are going to share? I think you mentioned that that would be available, but how does that look where, you know, the rest of the region can kind of see some of those comments and maybe things that we would want to grow off of too?
From the Civic Advisory Group and the Youth Advisory Panel, yes. We had just actually held both meetings, so didn't have a quick enough turnaround time to show what some of those findings, themes were from each, but we will share out that information and can talk about like who's on those, where there might be potential gaps as well, like how could you potentially help us get folk on those advisory groups, but we will share that feedback as we collect it.
Great, thanks.
Alex Hadright.
I had a couple questions. The first one, if a project is already in the RTP, would the forums need to resubmit that, or is everything being automatically carried over from the existing RTP?
You would need to resubmit it if it's not currently under construction or in NEPA/construction in the TIP. Under the proposed process that we used last time.
And then could you talk a little bit more about the timing of those forum project submittals?
Yep, so we wanted to start this conversation here, get a gut check on the process last time, some potential changes like the priority framework, evaluation framework. We do want to have a second conversation with the TAC before we move into other conversations with the RTC and board to affirm that process. Right now, we are looking at a potential call/solicitation phase beginning in late August. We are still, based on feedback, trying to extend that timeline to be about a month and a half for that submittal. One ask that we've put out to the county transportation forums is potentially leveraging conversations you're already having with CDOT related to the 4P process, the 10-year plan. We would like an action at the forum level to set the list that you're looking to submit from local member government, so that 15 submittal cap, as an example, being set at the forum level, and an action for a member to sit on the regional review panel as well. But I think late August is when we're looking at for the call for projects being open at least a month, if not a month and a half, and then in early mid-October, having regional review panels meet a couple times to review those investment priorities that we've received, review the scoring that's been completed by DRCOG staff, review additional data points that might be of interest through that evaluation process before we get into any conversation about what draft priorities could look like at this body's level or at the RTC or board.
And maybe last question. With the recent call for letters of interest for the corridor planning program, DRCOG produced a list that showed which corridors are eligible. Are you going to be doing something similar, showing which projects are going to be removed, if not resubmitted by the forums, or is that something that we'll have to determine for ourselves?
No, we'll be taking that action. We've already started conversations internally to confirm we're all on the same page on where that project might be. If we have any questions, we'll reach out, but we'll be providing that list that, at least from an initial staff perspective, is our anticipated direction for that project.
Any idea when that will be released to us?
Not at the moment.
additional questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Alvin. Thank you for this update. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
And we'll move to item number 7. This is the active transportation plan. This is attachment E in your packet, and this will be presented by Erin Villery, Senior Planner.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Erin Villery. I'm the Senior Active Transportation Planner here at DRCOG. And so I just wanted to give you all, I haven't talked about this in quite some time because we've been hard at work. So I just wanted to give you all an update on the Regional Transportation Plan, which is nearing an exciting milestone. So I think the last time I was here was maybe about the ATP was maybe last May. But I just wanted to give a little bit of a framework. So of course, the Active Transportation Plan fits within MetroVision and within the RTP. And I really wanted to just put this forward to just sort of affirm that this is really in conversation with a couple other adopted plans, the Taking Action on Regional Vision Zero plan and the Regional Complete Streets Toolkit. So we're really trying to fold this in and integrate it with other adopted planning products and really make it part of the suite or sort of an integrated part of the mobility. So just to give you an update on where we are and where we've been. So we kicked this off last summer in 2024 and have been kind of just working through it with our stakeholders and staff. So we kicked this off last summer. We're on about an 18-month planning cycle, have been conducting a lot of member engagement through our advisory group throughout the entire process. And the exciting thing is that we are quickly approaching our public draft period, hopefully next month, where we can actually present a draft of the plan to you, to RTC, to the board, and to members of the public to start collecting feedback and refine the plan with the hope of going to adoption in the fall. So just to give you a little bit of the framework or what's in the plan, what to expect. So really, we want this to be a tool for DRCOG, of course, but also a tool for members and local governments in the region. So we're spending a lot of time making the case for active transportation. We wanted to make sure that we really set it in context and provide some information for you all to be able to talk about benefits and emerging trends and challenges. A lot has changed since the last active transportation plan was put forward by DRCOG in 2019. So really be able to talk about what's the state of the practice, what's the state of the system in our region, and provide some tools and talking points for folks to be able to develop and work on your own systems. There are two major elements within the plan. The walking element, which is universal access to walking. So that's really focused on the pedestrian system in the region. A complete connected bicycling network is really focused on the bicycling and micromobility system in the region. And then finally, the sort of action section is the program and policy recommendations. And so we're really focusing on a very concise plan, very actionable plan, and providing a lot of resources within it to work from. Of course, the major peg that the plan hangs on is the Regional Active Transportation Network. We are continuing forward with the same general framework or scaffold that we used in the current plan, which is really sort of, we think of it as, we talk about it as the three-legged stool. So I just wanted to give you an example and talk through what those different pieces are. So if we're zoomed in on a section of the region, this is Denver, Lakewood, Wheat Ridge, Edgewater, and a little of Jefferson County as well. And just to sort of talk about the first leg of the stool is the pedestrian focus areas. And so this is a geometry that really aims to measure propensity to walk or potential latent demand for walking trips and for pedestrians. So it's really based on a lot of population and socioeconomic and demographic factors. We use things like safety data and the high injury network to inform this. We jobs and employment data. And this is really what we're looking for, is it's less infrastructure driven, more population driven, to understand where are there opportunities to walk and where might there be opportunities to focus, especially pedestrian investment that we're missing. So that's the first leg of the stool. Second is the short trip opportunity zones. And one thing I will say is this one was also, there was a lot of pretty rigorous engagement, especially with member governments and stakeholders, that we really wanted to try to capture local knowledge in this part of the plan. Short trip opportunity zones are based on where do we think there, especially using the DRCOG travel model, the focused travel model, where do we think there is a large share of trips under 2 miles, and we sort of see these as the opportunity to capture and shift. A lot of short trips. These are, this is sort of the sweet spot for walking and bicycling, especially is under 2 miles. Those trips can often be as fast on an active mode of transportation as driving, and so this is a real opportunity to reduce single occupant vehicle trips. And so using the travel model, we really focused on where's there high concentration of 2 mile or less trips happening right now, and so that sort of informs the second leg of the geometry. And then finally, the regional active transportation corridors, and so this is sort of the system of linear routes that we're thinking of. Where can they be higher comfort? Where can we really emphasize the standard of quality? This is for people walking or bicycling. And really we focused in this iteration of the plan in kind of rationalizing the network density or throughout the region. And so thinking, sort of moving from just the trail system to really what are the core linear routes that connect these sort of smaller areas that connect to one another. So we really focused on emphasizing about a 1 to 1.5 mile grid spacing in the really urban areas of the region, about a 2 to 3 mile spacing between regional routes in the more suburban areas, and then about a 3 to 5 mile spacing in the more rural areas to try to sort of spread the distribution and spread access throughout the region. Those are the sort of 3 legs of the stool. And how does this interact with local plans? Everybody has local bike networks, local pedestrian plans, or a lot of folks do. And so this really just kind of lays on top of that. This really gives an opportunity to kind of guide those interjurisdictional routes, those opportunities for collaboration. Where might we guide the region towards investing in more capacity or meeting sort of more emerging vehicle types? And so it's really meant as kind of an overlay to help guide local planning, to help us program funding, to do all these things, to encourage collaboration among jurisdictions. So that's the real bones of the plan is developing those networks that we can really put into action. But some other things that we've developed as well. There are also a couple of supplements to the plan that are really important. We've been working with our consultant team to develop an economic benefits analysis for the region to really quantify the impact of active transportation. We've also spent a lot of time working with member jurisdictions and talking to some national partners to develop a sidewalk delivery guide, which is really focused on what are some tools and ways to overcome barriers to completing the region-wide sidewalk network and providing accessible routes for people walking and rolling throughout the region. And so that really focuses on integrating some recent guidance, but also thinking about project delivery, cost, maintenance, some of those bigger issues, and really trying to supplement what's available in national guidance. And then building a better bicycle program, Bicycle Plus program, is something that we heard and really wanted to address. Was there are all these emerging vehicle types. There are things moving different speeds, rails, and things that are different sizes. So really trying to capture sort of what is the state of play around the micromobility, around small things with wheels, and how can we help serve growing ridership and emerging vehicle types with infrastructure and with programs. And so those will be sort of supplements to the guide. There'll be for public review alongside the plan itself, but are sort of these supplementary things that we can kind of keep as living documents if we want, that we update periodically, sort of as the practice continues to change. So the thing that I want to get on everyone's radar with is public draft review is coming. So we are on trajectory to have a public draft next month, mid-July. And so we're really going to start pounding pavement and trying to get the word out. And so the thing that I just wanted to get on your radar today is, of course, like to work days this week. So just keep that in mind. We'll be having more meetings with our stakeholder advisory group of member governments and partners, as well as our community advisory group. And we do have a plan website or a project website that we will be engaging with the public as well, which is engaged.drcog.org/ATP. And so just wanted to get that in front of everyone and be ready that you'll probably hear notice from us that the Action Transportation Plan draft is coming next month. And we really love your help getting the word out and providing lots of comments and helping us continue to shape this and make it the best possible products we can. So with that, just wanted to open the floor to questions and discussion and anything.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments for DRCOG staff? Brody?
Hi, Aaron. Brody Ayers, Aviation Special Interest Seat. Within the enhanced infrastructure, are you including bike parking and storage?
Very little bit in the plan itself, more so in the Bicycle Plus guide. But yeah, it's a consideration that we are thinking about, and we're coming up with some recommendations about how we can better inventory things like that, those sort of supportive infrastructure assets, providing guidance towards, lots of great national manuals and guidance on it as well. So trying to provide, what a sort of baseline of what supportive infrastructure best practices look like, but more of it will be outside of the plan in that supplementary guide.
I would highly encourage you to include that as we see where we're at. 7,300 people live within a quarter mile of the A-line stations. So if you're able to enhance that catchment, such as where we've been doing with adding some storage at the airport, it really brings more people in, especially around the electric scooters, enhancing the ability to store those safely. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think a lot of it is also just affirming and trying to capture work that people in the region. I do want to acknowledge all the work that you all at the airport have been beating that.
I have one more question, sorry. So the maps you're showing, I almost feel like it's like a plane from World War II where they show the planes that came back with all the holes in it and they patched the wrong spots, right? I'm curious about if that's what the maps are showing. Are we showing the areas we need to work on, or am I viewing that the other way around?
I know the graphic you're referring to. So you're asking for instance, the yellow is, so the simplest application of this is the yellow is the pedestrian focus areas, and this was built out of a series of geospatial factors to say that this is where we think the most impact comes from investing in, either enhanced sidewalks or adding sidewalks, so it's looking at certain things like sidewalk coverage and data, but also just where there are crashes happening. So not every project that we expect to be here is at a sidewalk, so this is more about guiding, things like funding all sorts of types of projects. But if there's a specific thing that that's bumping up against you, and
I'm just curious if you're showing these graphics and you further go through. Are we saying the areas in white are not going to receive funding, or what are we? I guess what are we saying with the colors and the?
Got it. Yeah, sorry, the legend is a little small. So it's not that they wouldn't receive funding. It's that if you go through your TIP application and DRCOG has the TIP data tool that I'm sure many have used, and say you draw your project extents. If it overlaps with a pedestrian focus area or a short trip opportunity zone, it sort of gives you points, you know, in the TIP application. So, so that is where we're guiding. We'd like guiding funding.
Any additional questions or comments for Dr. Cobb? Nope. Marissa Gahan.
Thanks, great presentation. I just wanted to also share that CDOT has updated our active transportation plan. Annalise Bono on my team, I think, has been to TAC meetings in recent months. But our plan is available for public review and comment now. You can find it on the CDOT website. It's open through July 18th. So I just wanted to share that. We've been working really closely with DRCOG on that plan and to ensure that our plan at the state level has great connectivity with DRCOG's active transportation plan. That out. Thanks.
Brody.
Okay, sorry. One more thing with the lines with the regional active transportation corridors. There's one that's running right through a runway. Is there a way I could remove that somehow?
Yes. Are you talking about the sort of the Pena Boulevard?
Oh, it's up in the northeastern corner. It's kind of a squiggly line along Boxelder Creek.
Oh, yeah. Let's look at that. Yeah. Thank you.
Brian Weimer.
Chair, as we're talking about regional corridors, are they considered all equal? And what I'm wondering about is kind of a hierarchy of what are transportation active corridors versus versus recreational active corridors. And I bring that up because talking funding, right? And this is a transportation organization, and you do have recreational opportunities for other funding sources. So have you thought about that and what that kind of looks like in terms of saying they're all equal, or are there some that should have a higher priority?
It's a great question. We've gone with the kind of they're all equal in terms of the end product and the end value. We've been grappling a lot with that question, and I think the place that we're at right now that and this is within specifically the advisory group. We've kind of had some conversations around that. Right now, we've done some work to sort of contextualize, like in urban areas, we envision these as being, you know, in urban and suburban areas, we envision these generally being more transportation focused, and that really guided sort of the routing and around those. And then areas, it's a fishy, yeah. And you know, more recreational or bicycle tourism driven routes. So in terms of an end product, there's not really a difference right now because some things might be existing but are good candidates for upgrades or enhancements. Some are sort of plan lines on a map and projects. And so this is a plan we've kind of shied away from putting too much differentiation while still trying to capture that nuance. But that said, that's an open conversation, and it's something that we've grappled with or grappling with.
Jacob?
Yeah, and just to add to Aaron's excellent answer, because it's a good point, Brian. You know, as you all know, we're lucky in this region. We have one of the most advanced, you know, one of the biggest networks for active transportation in the entire country for a large metropolitan area. And a lot of these corridors, as we all know, the Cherry Creek, the High Line, so many of them are both transportation and recreation, right? And as an MPO, we can fund both. Obviously, we do focus on transportation, but that doesn't mean we can't fund recreation. But I think another direct answer to your point, Ryan, is that when it comes time for application for specific funding, such as in the TIP is the primary example, you know, our criteria will also kind of help address some of your questions were like, what is the need for this project? How will this project be used? What's the benefit of the project, right? So I think when it comes time, this is a planning network, it's important, but when it comes time to funding specific projects, we do have criteria and structure in place to kind of filter through the best use of resources for funding the right projects.
Justin Schmitz.
Thank you for this. It's something that's needed, right? I think throughout the community, the city actually, we just are getting ready to adopt our active transportation next month. And one thing we heard a lot through comments, and I think you hit on this, was, there's a lot of these emerging vehicle types, right? Speed differences, all kinds of things in the last probably 3 years that have kind of added concern for some users, excitement for others, right? It mixes all through there. So I guess you guys talked about building this better bicycle program. If you could highlight just a little bit about what that looks like. I know you may not have all the detail yet, but I think it's a unique situation we're in. Because if you look at like road rules, right, they're kind of the same, right? Every jurisdiction, everywhere you go, has similar rules to the roads. But how every jurisdiction and county is dealing with this issue varies a little bit, right, as you cross boundaries. So at the DRCOG level, I guess I'm just curious, right? What does that look like? Maybe not now answering exactly, but in the future, right? Is there some way to kind of make best practices or something along those lines that everybody can build off of?
Yeah, we took a big old swing at that in the Bike Plus guide. I'll just call it the Bike Plus guide for now. And one of the challenges is it's actually been really hard to name that because of the unit. But a couple really important resources sort of came out right on time for us, which was the updated edition of the AASHTO Bike Guide, as well as the Bikeway Design Guide, and those had a lot of really good guidance around just kind of general design controls. But the thing that we really wanted to augment when we did this, essentially capacity and speed differential. When do you sort of what are the thresholds that it's really going to deteriorate pedestrian comfort to be on a shared use path next to a cargo bike, or something that's maybe 15 miles faster than they are. And so we've kind of developed some pretty early criteria. A lot of this is just really fresh, and it's really hard to to put a lot of science behind it. So we had a lot of conversations and have tried to put pen to paper to really say, like, this is comfort thresholds are, and so that really comes into play on the regional corridors is maybe to try to spur some of that thinking of where does expansion or separation make sense? Where are the volumes or the speed differentials high that comfort's really starting to break, and essentially trying to head off safety issues and concerns. So yeah, I'm excited to get that one out of the world and get some comments on it. We did take, hopefully we're on base.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate DRCOG taking that on, right? And I do think regionally something that could really be a benefit to all of us, right, as we start to work on it together. So
yeah, and the other thing I did want to pick up was you asked about regulation, and we had to get our hands around how different counties and different trails and bikes and things like that, and to at least get an inventory.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Erin, for this update and the opportunity to have this discussion. I think we're all looking forward to the public draft review in mid-July and taking a look at that Bike Plus plan. And thank you, Marissa, for bringing up the CDOT that's under review right now. And I'm really glad to hear that coordination's going on between CDOT and DRCOG for both of these active transportation plans. Very timely. Thank you. And we'll move on to their last item, just a quick informational item. Item number 8, grant informational form for the 2025 Safe Streets and Roads for All program, attachment F. Jacob, did you want to say a few words about this?
Yeah, just a few. Thank you, Chair Grant. So first, as a reminder, we started doing this, I think, a couple years ago for major discretionary grant programs, that whenever a notice of funding opportunity comes out, we ask you all to fill out, and ourselves, if we're applying or interested in applying, to fill out a grant information form. We include those in our TAC packet. And we do that just for regional coordination and transparency so that we can all see kind of what we're thinking about and what we're working on. This is probably the most popular discretionary grant program. We received 9 grant information forms by our June 12th deadline. We actually got another one in the door today, but there are 9 included in the packet, including our own. So I'm not going to go through them individually, but just to sort of wish all of us luck. We will be putting in a regional application. Those of you in local governments that are applying, of course, we wish you the best of luck as well in terms of getting some SS4A dollars into this region. For all of you that have requested support letters, one of Ron's last acts before leaving was to finish those support letters. Again, we got one in the door today that we'll deal with, but everyone else, if you requested a support letter from us, you should have received it. So that's all I wanted to say about it, Chair Grant. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Cog? Best of luck to everybody submitting applications. We'll move on to member comments and other matters. Does any TAC member alternate have any announcements to make? Go ahead, Kyra.
Thanks. Yes, I wanted to share some information about an upcoming RAC workshop. So for context, the Serious Ozone State Implementation Plan that the RAC and the Air Pollution Control Division have been working on for the past many months is going to the Air Quality Control Commission later this year for approval. The state plans to request voluntary reclassification to severe, so it does not model ozone attainment by next year's deadline, but it still contains the chapters that are needed to meet EPA planning requirements. So in parallel, the RAC is developing a control strategy blueprint over the next several months to make policy recommendations related to actions and implementation measures over the next 5 years about how we can achieve emission reductions to get us into ozone attainment through both measuring lower ozone and modeling compliance with the air quality standards. So we're holding 2 workshops this summer. The first one is for the Denver region, and it will be on July 22nd from 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. right here in this room. Thanks to Dr. Cog for letting us use the space. And they're an opportunity for input and brainstorming with stakeholders on control strategies to reduce air pollution. So we will be working with Dr. Cog to send out information about the workshop to the TAC list, and the information is also available on the RAC website if you're interested. And we encourage any relevant TAC members to attend or to forward that information to relevant staff of your organizations and partners. And we hope to have diverse attendance from local government, state government, private sector, and also environmental organizations. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyra. And thank you to Dr. Cog for sending out that information for us to follow. Any other additional comments or announcements? Jacob? No one else? Okay. Well.
Okay, thank you, Chair Grant. 2 more things from me. As Aaron mentioned, this Wednesday is Bike to Work Day. Hopefully everyone signed up. We really encourage your participation. Think it's going to be great. So that's this Wednesday. And then unfortunately, no summer break for us. You've heard today reference to, well, we're working on these things. We're going to bring you these things. We expect next month to be a pretty heavy agenda. And frankly, through the summer, we're just working on a lot of great work together. So I did want to put that out there to set expectations. We're definitely having a meeting in July. Definitely need you here. So we know it's the time for summer vacation. So if you do anticipate being out, please work with your alternate if you have one, so that we can get a quorum and have good attendance for the important work that we're going to bring to you next month and in the months ahead. Thank you so much.
Jacob? Any additional comments? Great. Well, thank you so much. Our next meeting will be July 28th, 2025. As Jacob mentioned, it'll be a busy agenda. So, and if you did not sign in, please do check in at the sign-in table or with Dr. Cog staff to be sure you're registered as attending. Thank you for your participation today, and we are now adjourned at 3:10 p.m. Thank you.